Welcome. Yes, this is A RAP CRITIC. I'm your boy Malik16, founder and creator of A RAP CRITIC. You can call me M16, but I'm not ripping through scenes from head to toe, blood soaking up your jeans. As you see, crates in the background. We always repping the crates, but we could not do this without having Diggin In The Crates present in spirit. And man, what an honor to have Brooklyn Zone, OC. The man needs no introduction, but it's an honor and a pleasure to have him here because today we're going over a very special album. We're going over the classic. It's turning 25 right now.
25.
Undisputed classic, underground. You told me it could be pronounced as Jewelz or Jewelz. The man himself, OC.
Right. However you choose to pronounce it, enunciate it, that's on the person.
How you feeling today, sir?
I'm good, man. I just came from a long walk from the supermarket and luggage bags and stuff like that. You know, so good though.
Yeah, are you in New York?
Nah, I ain't been in New York for 3 years.
Yeah, me neither. I'm on West Coast time out here.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm south. I'm still on the East Coast, but I'm just down south.
Smart money. All right, so a little history and background on this album. This album was released August 19th, 1997. We talk often on this channel about the year that 1997 was. We'll get into that. If you have not already, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. Go visit the Rap Ruler where you can cast your votes and rankings on these classic albums so you yourself, the global hip-hop community, can determine how classic these classics are, not something that a magazine or a radio host told you. And you could also win the merch and the prizes, the t-shirts are up there. All right, with no further ado, category 1, we're going over the product, the album itself. And so the first dimension we talk about when we do that is dimension 1, quality of production. So see, producers on here, how did you go about choosing who you wanted to work with for this particular album?
By default, I mean, Buck Wild was, of course, Diggin is always there. That's my circle. But what people don't realize is living up in D&D, you had MOP, you had the Beat Miners, you had Gangstar, and a whole bunch of other people. And this album just came by default, man. Like the first album, me and Bucky and O and Prince and March and Finesse really did it ourselves because nobody wanted to work with me. So fast forward, I had in mind who I wanted to deal with for the second album, but I mean, it's really in-house. Premier is in-house. He's a Diggin member. This is what people don't understand. And I just didn't get to work with him on the first album because he was super busy doing his thing, doing Illmatic, doing Gangstar, doing MOP stuff and stuff like that. Biggie, Nas, Jay. And for this album, I just wanted to, in hindsight, I didn't know I was grown. We don't know we growing when we younger. You can't sound like the first album, so your second album has to, go a different direction. And, the growth for the album, I just wanted to have a different sound. First album was jazzy.
We were coming out that era, a lot of jazz fusion hip hop, right?
The jazz fusion that I believe, people like Tip and Large and Pete, Showbiz and Diamonds had sold up. It made sense, like I said, just doing a different direction and going back to the D&D thing. I was in D&D every day. I just tapped Preem on the shoulder, and I tapped Beat Miners on the shoulder, and I was like, yo, this is what I want to do, and that's how it came about.
And these are not small contributions, like you mentioned with Primo. I mean, this is around the era where he started being highly coveted outside of Gangstar production. And he gave you 3 big joints, right? And and not the whatever. It's just, and they all had their own identity. I thought, one thing about the production contributions here, the three mains, they gave you three, right? Buck Wild gave you three. You know, Mr. Walt gave you three, and Primo gave you three. They were flexing it. They didn't give you sound alikes. They gave you very distinct, different pockets to chill in. You know, When the G sounds very different from MUG, Muddy Underground, right? And then My World was just unheard of, right?
Primo didn't like My World.
Primo didn't like it.
Not at first. You know, he does his thing on the spot, so he thought it sounded like he thought the bass line sounded like Shook Ones a little bit, similar. At first listen, and I was like, bugging, man. Like, what? You know, and I was like, yo, leave the room. Give me like 20 minutes. And he was like, yo, I'm going to get me some smoke and I'll be back. And I was like, cool. When he came back, I had the first verse.
Wow. Yeah, it was unorthodox. And shout out to the Primo sampling here, because even if you would have kept just the title of the song that it's sampled from, the title of the song is sampled from is crazy. It's called Killer's Lullaby by Barry White, right? And I mean,
right, from a soundtrack at that.
From a blaxploitation flick, right? Together, right? In Primo's show that he does on YouTube, actually, he talks about the making, stories behind a lot of his production, and you'll hear him every now and then talk about not liking songs at first and they grow on him. That was immediately like that song just went off, and we'll talk about that down the line. But I want to talk about the fact that you had Beat Wonders on there as well. It seems like it wasn't both. It wasn't Evil and Walt. It was mostly Walt.
It was both of them, but I brought the Dangerous. Of course, that's a Park Jam favorite. And years ago, MC Shan did the record Down by Law. You know what I'm saying? And I always loved the record. And it was actually an older Shan the way he freaked it. But me and L just put our twist on it. And I brought the sample of Raw and E. More War is hard when it comes to, you know, familiar samples. It has to be something that's banging, and he was against that.
Wow.
He was against the seventh, what's the name of the sample?
Seventh Wonder.
Seventh Wonder.
Yeah.
He was against that. And I just wrote him a check and was like, hey, and he was like, you gonna play me? You gonna come at me like that?
Right.
And I was like, because I'm telling you, this is a Park Jam record. It's gonna work. And how me and Al gonna go back and forth with it. And him and E ended up collaborating on It's Only Right and Strong J remix.
I was gonna ask you about that, because now that I know that you bought them the Seventh Wonder sample, like, did you also bring that BT Express sample for It's Only Right? Because that's another, 70s era, it could be considered a commercial joint. For Beat Miners, that's a big deal, because they coming out of this, they hardcore, boom bap, murky boot camp sound. You brought them out of that for this album.
Right. And on top of that, I felt like, Into the Stage is probably one of my favorite group albums of all time. The stuff they did on there, it's only right. The BT Express thing was synonymous to something that they probably would have threw away on that Into the Stage album. So I was like, yo, I want to do this record because these was my favorite joints growing up.
Right.
Some of my favorite records. And, they've been done by some artists, but I knew I'd bring my little twist to it and me and Walt freaking and have it grinding.
That's amazing. I got to give you props for even having that ear, because you're one of the few rappers to sample that. That has not gone. Some samples get burnt out. You hear people do Rising to the Top forever, but nobody's touched that BT joint like that. So it was refreshing to hear it come at the end of the album, because you kind of needed that. One thing that your album gets praised for, if we go Google it and look it up right now, everyone kind of unanimously talks about how elite the production is, how it all kind of, we talked about all the kind of big joints, right? These Primo, My World, and Dangerous, but those album cuts, those deep cuts, and how dark but melodious they are is what it gets praised for. That JJ Band sample from Finesse, Did you pick any of the other samples on the album? The Crow, Hypocrite, Chosen One?
The Crow, Showbiz, I believe was record shopping in Japan when he was on tour with L and Ness and brought the record back. And he sat on the record for a while. So we talking he sat on that record probably from 92, that sample. And, we did that album in 96, 97.
Yeah.
So he sat on that sample and didn't know what to do with it until that project came up. And I was like, when he played it for me, and I know his chopping, situation, I was like, I already know what he could do to it. I just left. I left the room and let him work. I didn't have a lot of people in the studio. For that matter, me and him, never really hardly. So I left him in the studio for about an hour or two. I probably went to the club or something and came back. And the Crow was ready. Added drums to it. Took it home, tweaked it, came back the next couple of days and was like, I'm gonna have this shit banging. And he said what he was gonna do to it.
I did want to ask you before we jump out of this dimension, who is DJ OG? Because he was relatively against everyone else there. He's kind of not as well known, so I wanted you to shed light on.
OG is a DITC member. He's a producer. DJ road DJ for us. Our main road DJs were Rock Raider, OG, and Boogie Blind. And opened there from day one. Opened with Diggin before me.
Wow. What a lineup.
Yeah.
What a line. Yeah, I was going to mention you had Rock Raider on here. Rest in peace, Rock Raider.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's official. Something for y'all to Yeah. I mean, it's a true hip hop album in all factors of it, right? So, on a scale from 1 to 5, what would you give the quality of the production?
I mean, I would give it a 4. Just me looking in hindsight today, what I would do different, I would give it a 4. That's solid.
Yeah. What would you change?
I would probably put the original Strong J on the album, which OG produced and B- remix, but the original was done. The original sample was used by 8 for Minister Society.
Yeah.
That record was crazy. So I didn't see me topping 8 sample. And I wasn't going to disrespect him by doing the record unless it was going to be either, parallel to his or higher. And that's just naturally competition. And, me and O was like, yo, let's just hold on to it. And, my manager at the time, the label reps was like, yo, I got to keep this record on the album. And I was like, I'll get somebody to remix it. And that's what ended up happening.
Did your manager, Mr. Dave?
Mr. Dave, yup.
Wow. History there. Something for y'all to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That's the quality of production. We'll jump to dimension 2, the cohesiveness of it. How does it all go together? We talked about Showbiz jumping into the Japanese jazz samples and for the Crow, and to feel a lot of that melodiousness, even though the beats are darker, like the title track from Finesse. I think they have analogs. They match up well. Completely different producers, but they got the same type of ear. So when you listen to a song like Chosen One, which is also a Japanese jazz sample, they were right on the same kind of time. You know what I mean? Everybody was in the same mind state as what it seemed like. And even your heavily sampled songs, you hear a lot of albums, sometimes the heavily sampled joint sounds so out of place. Like a song like Dangerous on somebody else's album would have been like, what is this? This came out of nowhere, but it went.
Right.
I think a lot of that has to do with your sequencing. Were you in charge of your sequencing on your album?
I do all my albums. I put all my music together. I put everything together. You know, I just get people to produce, and everything else I take it from there, from interludes to the, you know, the sequencing of the album. Of course, you know, we all, but at the end of the day, I make the final call about, you know, what's first and what's last, and you know, everybody helps me arrange and rearrange, and we'll ride around. You know, Cream used to have an MPV back in the days with a system in it. And you know, that's how we would test our stuff. He had an MPV, and later on he bought I think a 540 stick BMW, and he had a system in that. We would go in his car and listen.
Yeah, people don't understand the importance of that car test. That car test is crucial.
Take it around the city, you know, or he'll take me home for the night, you know, and we'll listen to the cuts, you know what I'm saying? And that's how we judge the album.
Yeah, we talk about the days of DATs and burning albums to CD and having to put it in.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, and none of these producers consulted with each other. Y'all didn't record in the same spaces. I mean, D&D was like the hub, but like none of them were like, what you got? Nah?
Yeah, everybody did that. You know, Walt here with Cream doing, oh, you got me doing this? And I'm like, yo, it's gonna work. I'm telling you, like, you know, like I said, Walt, Cream is outspoken too, but Walt is more like the elder of everybody. Mm. And, you know, he's very outspoken. If he don't like something, you know, and he's another guy that was instrumental in sequencing the album as well. I'm like a main. You know, Walt was like, nah, change that. Put only, you know, he was the one to say put the song right near the end. And, you know, that's what we did. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was needed because there's a sequence where it got pretty serious towards the end of the album. The beats were a little bit more darker and hypnotic, and then that came back with more of the party feel right before you rounded out. So on a scale from 1 to 5, would you give this for cohesiveness, how it all goes together?
I give it a 5.
Nice.
That's perfect to me. Like, I never had issues with my sequence. You know, the production. You know, if I can change, like I told you on the first judgment, if I can change certain things, I would. But you know, it is what it is today. That's why we're having this conversation.
Word. All right, something for y'all to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Dimension 3 is the question of the intentional mood and tone. There's 2 ways to look at mood and tone, right? There's what you were saying earlier about once you deliver it, the mood and tone that's interpreted by the listener, that's up to them as individuals. But your intentional mood that you were trying to set in tone, that's the other part of that. So would you go in here try to give the feel for this album?
Well, what I record for myself, I record, this is what people don't understand about me. I record from everyday life, and people be like, what does that mean? I'm like, yo, you can't read without writing. You can't, I mean, if you don't soak up what's going on around you or read, or if you mean a mathematician, whatever you choose to do or you're doing in life, paying attention to people, swapping stories with people, you ain't gonna be able to write. You can write the same thing over and over and over and over. So I make it my business to be a fly on the wall. Since I was a kid, I was always a fly on the wall, kept my mouth shut and just watch, listen to people talk. And this is where my ideas come from. And once the stuff is done, it's no longer mine. That's just how I feel about it. It's my project, the way I interpreted it, the way I see it, the way I put it together. Of course, it's mine. But once you give it to the world, it's no longer yours. It's everybody's. And that goes with anyone.
Well, for yourself, when you went into this, because you definitely mentioned you know, you were growing, right? You said from word life, you were growing. What did you want the feel to be for yourself when you were making this?
I wanted people to respect me. I wanted people, you know, we in a competition-based business. It's about naturally, it's about competition. DJs compete against each other, MCs compete against each other, writers. And you know, contrary to the mentioning Biggie, Jay-Z, Nas, Prodigy, Q, D.O.C., whoever you want to mention, in my mind, in my pen game, I'm like, yo, I'm right along with these dudes. Like, y'all keep mentioning trifecta, like, these are the only cats that exist on the planet. So that's what I went into this album, my sophomore album with. I went in sort of with a chip on my shoulder. And people that I'm not going to mention that didn't want to, you know, mess with me on the first album, you know, production-wise, but, you know, I just went in it, went into this album with, they gonna respect me. They gonna respect my pen game.
Yeah, big props for. There's so many rappers that would not say they came in with a chip on their shoulder because they're afraid of how that would sound. The honesty was everything. So knowing that you went in with that aim in mind, on a scale from 1 to 5, how much do you feel you accomplished that?
I give it a 3.
Okay, damn, 3. Why is that?
Yeah, because I'm still, you know, at that time, thinking back now, I was still growing. I was 20-something years old. So for me, albums are like books. They like chapters in your life. They are chapters. And contrary to what people say, some people gonna like the things you do. Some people, you know, are not gonna like some things you do. And I understood that by the second album. I ain't saying I liked it, but I understood that mentality of, you know, the whole wave could turn against me on the sophomore tip. You know, if I ain't confident, for me, I always tell people it took me 20 years for people to be like, I get him now.
Huh. Damn. All right. That's something for y'all.
I'm better than everybody now. That's how I feel.
That's how you gotta feel, for sure.
Yeah, I'm better than all the Nas's, the J's, the Bigs, whoever. That's how I feel. I never said it.
Right.
But they feel the same way.
And you know what's crazy is, and this is why we do these interviews, because I mean, this is stuff we would never know behind the scenes. And every time you approach the mic, you sound like you felt that way already, especially on your guest appearance. When I ever heard you on other people's joints, you were coming for blood. You know what I mean?
I mean, yo, Nas left me hanging, and I don't say this in a bad way, but we both were signed to MC Search, Searchlight Music.
Mm-hmm. Back to the grill again.
Right. But I was signed first, and then Nas got signed after me to Search. And fast forward, you know, he left me hanging on the first album. Me and Buck waited hours in the studio for him. He was supposed to be on Word Life, but he didn't show up. In hindsight, I tell a story from time to time that we was young, and dude was the golden child. He had the whole hip hop community on his back. By default, because I don't think he went into this album believing that he was going to be the golden child. Like, he did a hell of a project. Illmatic is, I don't even call it a rap record. It's a hell of an album. And, you know, in any genre of music, you get one of those. You get those people who come through and people just get it. And, like I said, for me, I knew it was gonna be it was gonna be dragged out for a long time before people understood who I am.
That makes sense. And just being able to say that this was the mentality you had, Yeah, I just read that piece not too long ago about the Nas in the first session. But yeah, just being able to reflect on growth, man, that's the beautiful part about having longevity in the game, being able to say, I was at this point in my life.
Him and Jay had beef because he stood Jay up. You know what I'm saying? Like, he stood Jay up. This is where their beef, part of their beef started. You know, Jay tapped him on the shoulder to come in and rock with him early on, you know. But like I said, man, at the end of the day, I'm glad those situations occurred. It just made me the artist I am today.
I was going to ask you about the Jay connection because I remember a joint that was out, I think the same year as this album was out, that you were on with a dude named Tone Hooker and Jay-Z. And y'all go way back, right? There's a connection there, right?
Right. Yeah, me and Jay got history. Yeah. I did a record for him. He was in this, I told you, him, Big, well, Nas and Big was taking off at this time. I'm talking about 94, 95, 96. So they weren't in D&D so much. You know, they was touring and doing shows. And, you know, they was the it guys. And Jay had a fight on his hand as well. So in a sense, I related to him. I related to him more because, you know, he came in the game late age-wise. And I heard Jay. Right. I heard this dude 10 years prior rocking with Kane.
Yeah.
On mixtapes. You know, him, Jazzo, and Kane, you know, freestyling on Cutmaster DC mixtapes. And, you know, the way he's rocking today is more or less what he was doing 10, 15, you know, 91, 90, 89, 88. This is Jay. You know, dude he's nothing to be messed with, man.
Right. And you were in the beginning of all of that. Like, this is your freshman class that you came out of.
Yeah. And Big Nas, like, that's my class.
And at that point, no one knew where everyone was gonna go, so it was even playing field, man. And that's why I think a lot of people miss when you hear them talk about the golden era, 1994, the golden year, because it was all y'all joints were getting played simultaneously. And I mean, we'll talk about this as we go.
Right.
Jump
let me clear something up real quick. I'm proud of them dudes because they did something that they took it somewhere else and set a precedent that Kane and Rakim did when they first came out. That's why I'm proud of Jay and Nas. Like, I mean, I'm sure if it wasn't for them in the business today, you know, me and you wouldn't be having a conversation either. We still need them guys.
Yeah, I feel you.
I'm just saying, as adults and grown men now, mature men, like I'm happy they still around. You know, it kept me around.
It's vital, man, and taking rapping into being 40 and 50 and still garnering respect. We needed someone to do that. Word? Hey, brother, salute.
But you know, if Jay and Nas and you know Sticky and Fredro and all these other guys weren't still around, Bus, you know, Joe and shit.
Yeah.
Where would I
say no more. All right, so something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 4, the redundancy, repetition factor versus the distinction. So how distinct were the songs from each other? Are there any redundancy, any repetition of words or sounds? So this is more or less a question of, do the beats get repetitive? Do your words get repetitive? I did want to point something out, man. You might be one of the only Brooklyn rappers that does not shout Brooklyn on every song. I don't know if you noticed that, man. I mean, every rapper from Brooklyn, I mean, chest banging, every song, even J. Rule, Biggie, Boot Camp. Did you ever notice that?
Yeah, I probably did it on purpose because I didn't have to, but I had the best of both worlds. I grew up in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And I moved to Jamaica, Southside Jamaica, Queens. This is where my lineage in hip hop and the music business started. Pharaoh lived across the street from me in Southside. 110, 14, 157, between 110 and 111. I'm a Southside dude as well. So, Southside Jamaica, Queens dude as well. So,
I'm so glad you cleared that up, because I was going to ask you, was there a point in your career where people mistook you or only thought you were from Queens and didn't know about the Brooklyn, or only thought you were from Brooklyn, didn't know about the Queens?
Yeah, so a few people, but I always made it. You had people that tried to actually, try to disrespect me too. Like, yo, how you talking this Brooklyn shit? And it's like, listen, I moved to Queens in 89, I'm 85. But everybody, all my family is still in Brooklyn. So I was going back and forth to Brooklyn since a child, since I was a preteen. So I lived back and forth. I stayed in, I still got family in Brooklyn to this day. Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, Brevoort, Red Hook. I got people. My lineage is Brooklyn. But here's the thing too. Everybody who moved to Brooklyn in those times, or quote unquote call themselves making it, moved to Queens. That's the natural thing.
Fact.
So what's the difference? We all from New York.
Yeah. I think because your connections to other things, like you did a lot of collabs with Organized Confusion, and I remember you being on joints with like Mike Geronimo and Royal Flush, and I'm like, yo, it's Brooklyn and Queens, and then once I caught wind that you're from both and you rep both, I find it's only like people get real weird with that where you claim stuff. You could spend 25 years of your life somewhere else. Like people still mad at Tupac for repping California, but you can't please everybody.
It's on the individual, you know what I'm saying? My thing was New York in general. Like, my whole crew is from the Bronx.
Right, that's the other thing, right?
With the exception of one.
Right.
Oh, L is from Harlem.
Right. So,
but,
with that though, where it makes you unique is that, you gonna rap, you gonna shout Brooklyn, Bushwick specifically, I think, on maybe like 2 tracks here, but it's not what you're building things around. And so on the word side, I don't hear you repeat a lot of stuff often. A lot of times we get intentional repetition and then we get lazy repetition. Sometimes rappers run out of shit, so they run out of words and they just start saying the same thing. You never get to this point on the album where there's fumes. And then as far as like purposeful repetition where you're trying to like brand or rep your crew or your area, even that is kind of sprinkled throughout. You mention every member of the Crates crew in your own way throughout different songs, but it's not flooded with DITC. It's just here and there.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know if I heard any repetition on the word side. Now, if people want to be purists and on the production side talk about repetition, I think they find a hard time there too, because the glue that holds everything together is boom bap. Most of the beats on here have these heavy bass drum kicks, and no matter how melodious the samples are, the bass drum kick, which a lot of people consider like true hip hop, right? Most everybody contributed in that way. I don't think it ever gets repetitive. I don't think anybody's using the same patterns. So, I mean, what would you give this on a scale from 1 to 5? 5 means it wasn't repetitive at all. 1 means it was super repetitive.
I would probably give it. I would have to meet it in the middle, just because right now I'm trying to think of the album and every song at the same time. But we all know I always mention Diggin. We all know from time to time I shouted out the crew members. But I'll give it a 3, man, just because. And I mean, I probably inherited that from my elders like Kane. Kane didn't always mention Brooklyn. And I learned that from guys like him, guys like Slick Rick, G-Rap, you know, people who actually, you know, they ride the backs of what borough they came from.
Right. It was definitely a you know where I'm from kind of thing. Like, listen to what I'm saying.
Right.
You already know where I'm from,
Exactly.
right? Right.
Exactly. So for me, I would actually be lying to say I don't know how repetitive I wasn't repetitive, because I probably said things, but I spaced them out.
You didn't even say your name multiple times. You know, a lot of rappers say their name a bunch of times. You didn't even do that.
Right,
so,
right.
Something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. We're gonna jump to dimension 5. The amount of content versus the amount of songs. So we talk on this channel about the sweet number, right? We live through hella eras now where you get these short albums that are 7 songs long. We live through the era of albums being 25 songs long, but the undisputed safe numbers for classics is usually around 10, like Thriller, Illmatic, to about 14. You really don't want to go beyond 14, 15 when you're talking classics, because then you get filler. And so you swim right in this safe zone, 14. And out of 14 songs, we're talking about the ratios here, right? The ratio of topical subject matter versus the amount of songs. A lot of times we get songs where there's only one track where they're talking about something and it's all battle raps. I can just jump to the 1 to 5 scale right now and ask you how well balanced of an album you think this is on the scale from 1 to 5.
It's about a 3.
About a 3. You a very moderate rater, man.
Yeah, because there's some things I would do different. Looking back on, I do this personally. Sometimes I won't listen to my albums for a long time, and then I'll go back and listen to them. And it's like, damn, I would have did that. I found my pocket later.
Which album do you feel like you found your pocket on?
Bon Appetit.
I knew you was gonna say Bon Appetit.
Yeah, I found my pocket with that album. And Jewelz, it's a sophomore album. I was still finding myself. I knew what I was doing, but you still like wet behind the ears a little bit, so to speak.
So you feel
still
like
a new artist.
In hindsight, you would have talked about more things, more life things.
I don't know. I just know I would have approached some things different. Like, here's something y'all don't know. Ness did Jewelz, the title track. I heard the message before he gave it to Dre. Finished. I heard, everything you hear Rel and Mary do. I'ma say Tammy, one of them wrote the hook. Tammy Lucas or I believe I'm getting this wrong, but Rel and Homegirl wrote sang and wrote it and everything.
Right.
Message that went on Chronic 2001. I begged us for that record. It was already done, and he held on to it. And I was about to give him my whole budget for that, but he was like, "Nah, this is something special to me." So he did that record 2 years prior. I'm talking about 9-5. He did the message. He rapped on it and everything. Fast forward, he went out to LA. He was pitching Big L to write for Dre. He met Melman. Melman introduced him to Dre. Ness was heavy, started being heavy into the production. Dre said, "Play me some shit." He played him some stuff, and then he played that record. And Dre was like, "Yo, what you want for that?"
Right.
And when he came back, it made sense. I wasn't mad at it, but I said, yo, I need something equivalent to that. So he did the Jewelz record from scratch from me, and he didn't finish. He didn't really like it. Not that he didn't like it, he wasn't sure about it. And Premier ended up mixing. Premier like, yo, you bugging. You know, that thing you said earlier, the producers letting each other hear what they did for me.
Right.
And Premier was like, yo, you bugging. This is crazy. This is the title track. You let me mix it. And Premier ended up mixing Jewelz. So that's the story. I tried to get the kind of 2001 song, The Message, to be on Jewelz album, but that's not moving.
Yeah, that's
Dre. He presented it to Dre. It made sense to him, and it made sense to all of us. We was like, that's Dr. Dre. We were like,
that's crazy. Yeah, that's like an exclusive gem. I don't know who would know that. Like that's insider information right there. Yeah.
Dre ended up keeping Rel on the record and replaced the female who sang the exact same thing Mary sang, but she sang on the trip.
Gotcha.
And fifth, she sang that. Rel wrote the Message record, the chorus.
Word. Shout out to Rel. Yeah, I'm gonna find the name. I'm gonna put it up in the credits. I like giving people their flowers. But yeah, man. I mean, that's just such a humble assessment to say that you could have done more, because people would argue it's a well balanced album. So it's something for y'all to consider on the scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, Dementia 6, the big one here. Features, man. Features. Who we got on this album? We got Bumpy Knux. That's Prince Poe and Pharaoh. Right. You got Big L, the legend, Harlem All Day. I'm from Harlem. And then of course you got which is funny, he's credited as Freddie Fox on one joint and Bumpy Knuckles on another joint, depending on what version of the album we get, right? Streaming is listed differently. What I really wanted to know what made you have him appear twice?
It was his ideas.
That's crazy.
Fox came up with Win the G and MUG. He came up with the ideas. And, ain't no secret, I'm a fan of Freddie Fox. And this is, he had the Bumpy thing already, but nobody knew the Bumpy thing too much at that time. And that's where Bumpy Knuckles showed up at. But it was already, he already born Bumpy Knux. It's just people didn't know that side of him yet. You know what I'm saying?
I remember when the alias started floating around the underground, aka Bumpy Knuckles. I think he might have had a single where he named it Bumpy Knuckles. It's like, I don't know if you understand, like, this album was such a cornerstone of the year 97 that you brought his name to a lot of people that wouldn't have known it, It might be weird to say because he's the OG, right? But it's like, nah, man, like 2 songs on an album that was highly talked about, it brought a lot of recognition and attention. We saw Freddie Fox, Bump Knux. Everybody got familiar with the Bumpy Knuckles name because we saw him on a lot of features after this album. A lot of prominent joints.
I'm a Freddie Fox fan from the Master album, and further back, this is the guy that was supposed to be Eric B's MC before Rock Kid.
Right.
I know Fox, so
right. The heads know Fox. You got to think the Flavor Unit entity known as Freddie Fox, it went quiet for a couple of years unless you were in the underground. So you having him on this album, introducing the Bumpy Knux, the new iteration, that's what I'm talking about.
Plus, Trex is his man. He's touring with Naughty. So fast forward to 9/7. In the midst of him still working, I think he reintroduced himself and reinvented himself with the Bumpy thing.
Yeah, absolutely. the way he's spitting, I wanted to bring this up. I don't know if you noticed this, and this could just be my interpretation. I try to keep my personal opinion out of this, but it almost felt like on the tracks with him, you got more aggressive too. You attacked the mic a little bit more than you did on other songs. You peep that, or you think that might be a reach?
I probably did because I was fanned out, and this is Freddie Fox, man. Like I'm a music enthusiast. I'm a hip hop enthusiast from the inception, from the gate. So to know, let me tell you how I got him on there. This is Showbiz's man. So I'm working on Jewelz, and I'm upstairs at another spot called Unique. But downstairs from Unique Studios is where Pac got shot.
I'm familiar. Quad.
So I leave Unique that night to go to McDonald's. It's a McDonald's like a few feet right there on the Deuce, whatever. And who's standing at McDonald's? And I'm like, damn. So I knew him and Showbiz was cool, and I was like, yo, Show, I knew Fox on this album. I seen him at McDonald's, but I ain't want to approach him. He had a female with him, and he just looked like he didn't want to be bothered.
Right. Right, you don't bother. You don't bother. You don't want to be bothered. Right.
He a big dude, and I was a little dude at the time, and I'm like, yo, I just asked Show. Show set that whole thing up, and that's how me and Fox became friends, man, and worked together. And he didn't ask for no bread, even though I offered him bread. He turned it down. He actually said he loved my music, and I was blown away by that shit.
It's got to be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, so he came up with the ideas for those records.
That's crazy. You think y'all went way back?
Yo, he said this maybe like 10 years ago. Me, him, and Cream was supposed to do an album together, and Cream, was mad busy. But yo, me and Fox got we got a chemistry. I don't know where that shit came from, but I seen him doing a Sway interview one time, and he was like, who do you most vibe with when you do collaborations? And I seen him think hard, but I seen him he didn't want to offend anybody. He got a lot of friends too, quite a couple of friends in the game. And he was like, yo, I did what I do with Tretch is what I do with Tretch. What I do for me and Old Guy. And we only made a couple of records together, but just being in the studio with him, yo, I can close my eyes and turn my back, and we'll come up with something that's amazing.
It really is. It's one of those chemistries that I guess you can't make it up. It happens organically.
It happens.
Same thing with Organized. Question mark there. I think a lot of people at the time had this question, and to me, this might be another personal question. How come you only had Organized on that small part, on just the hook for War Games, and not separate verses? It was a real unorthodox structure you did anyway. It was like one long verse, then the hook, then one short verse.
That was Pharaoh and them idea. And, this is something I learned from them. These are my mentors, Prince and Poe and Pharaoh are mine. To this day, I put them on a whole nother pedestal. Like, they made me the writer I am today. And then, because Prince is more outspoken than Marsh, but Prince would tell me to be original and don't sound like us. Because I used to sound like them. It's natural. I was around them. I was their protege. Gotcha. And they used to be like, nah, that shit, you sound like me. And I used to get upset. But looking back at it now, it makes sense. He was just teaching me to find my own voice. And March, me and Poe used to get into arguments, but March used to pull me to the side and be like, yo, Poe ain't trying to disrespect you. Poe's just trying to make you understand to find your own voice. We want you to find your own voice. You're not a member of Organized Confusion. In spirit you are, but you're OC. You're the solo artist. Find your voice, man. And I came up with the notion that I rap how I talk. So how me and you having a conversation now is how I actually rap.
Absolutely. That's great.
That's due to March and Prince. Prince is like, yo, the way you talk to us, the way you have conversations with, that's how you're supposed to be penning this shit. And they taught me how to channel that into how I actually vocalize with people.
Yeah. Whenever I coach people that want to rap and be rappers, because you notice a lot of people when they think they rap, they got to put on some kind of like costume voice. I'm like, nah, your natural projection is gonna be your best friend.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah. Yo, Method Man raps the way he talks. Nas raps the way he talks.
Yep.
Jay raps the way he talks. It's a lot of artists who rap the way they talk, and I get that. You know what I'm saying? But they told me this 30 years ago.
Word.
Rap the way you talk, man. Talk how you rap. Like how you have conversation and slick shit you be saying to us. Like rap. Try to put it in word form, and I didn't understand that. It took me a while. Even Search told me, yo, find your voice. You know what I'm saying? And it was frustrating in the beginning, man, but I'm glad they put me through that.
It's always frustrating. Yeah, it's definitely a journey all rappers got to go through for sure. I remember, waiting for my voice to find its groove, because you can always tell when you're not coming from the pit, too.
Right.
And so we in the era of the crews, and I gotta say, Diggin, y'all a really humble crew. Y'all stay humble. Y'all ask for your respect, but y'all didn't go and just try to do all these outlandish things. And so with crews, right, it's rare that you get the whole crew on projects, right? So Diggin's nicely represented here. You got production from Show, you got production from Finesse and Buck Wild, you got Big L on there. Any particular reason why we don't see or hear AG, Diamond D, or Fat Joe on there? Or it just didn't go down?
We just never did music together.
Gotcha.
Me, Diamond, usually when we toured, or we did Diggin' tours, it was just me, Diamond, Ness, and A. And me and Diamond spoke about that shit years ago. Like, yo, I never picked nothing for the album, and I was like, I just never heard nothing that fitted with the album. It wasn't whack, but I've gotten tracks from Diamond. AG played wrong, but the Joe thing, I think Joe, we didn't understand his path back then.
Gotcha.
He had a tunnel vision from, Joe was a genius. Big L was a genius. A lot of people probably wouldn't like Big L today because he was going for the position Jay is in.
Right.
He was going for a superstar status. There was no secret.
Yeah.
If you listen to Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, he was in high school. About to graduate high school. Coming out of high school, and he was coming out of that deal, going into finding himself. So he's a kid turning into an adult. And if you listen to Ebonics, it's night and day. He found his pocket, and dude was just super nice like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I seen his pocket change in a short period of time, and that's just something that not everyone can do. Like I said, it took me 20 years for people to be like, him. I seen him, his transformation when it came to when it came to spit. And yo, he was getting dangerous by the year. Like, you know what I'm saying?
And I know what you're saying about Joe, because at this time Joe was setting it up. He was setting the commercial ascension up. He was collabing with Diddy and those kinds of things. And L was on it. L's from Harlem, man. Like, it was evident. I think a lot of people, when people pass, they like to cement them forever the way they remember them. L wanted to be on Hot 97 all day. Throwing dollars in the air like that. That's like you said. That's where he would have been. They said he would have been on Rockefeller. If he lived another year longer, he would have signed with Jay. So I mean, people forget that. And sure enough, all those purists would have turned on him, because they would be like, he sold out.
But people don't know he take and don't quote me on it, but I believe Dame already spoke about it. But he filmed the battle with DMX and Jay. Wow. L did. I don't know if Dame got the tape or Biggs or whoever, but they was adamant about this tape not getting out. Yeah. But him and Jay battled up in Harlem. Jay and L battled. This is how they got cool. You know what I'm saying? And he was putting his rounds in. So that whole battle shit that went on in Harlem basically morphed from him. It was something that he started, so to speak. But Dude wanted to be a superstar. It was no ifs, ands, about it. You know what I'm saying? Ebonics, he wrote that for like 2 years. He was on tour with me when he was writing Ebonics.
So is that kind of how the Dangerous collab came? Y'all were touring together closely at that time, or you just knew you and L would sound great on the, and you saw that?
We were the two youngest, so it made sense. Like, see, this is another thing people don't understand. Or some people know, some people don't, but we did the Black Mass soundtrack. If you remember, for the Jet Li album. Jet Li, Black Mass. And we had a record called Get Yours.
I remember that.
Produced.
Yep.
Well, prior to that, Show gave me and Ella bag to do an album together. He just ended up getting murdered.
Wow. So this would have been an OC and Freddie Fox album, an OC and Big L album. Wow. I know you and AG eventually wound up doing an album together.
Right. Yeah, but Show met niggas in Harlem. Show had a crib out there somewhere. He met us, meet me out here. And this is after the Dangerous record. He seen it. He was like, damn, these niggas got a chemistry in the crew. He was like, yo, y'all gonna do an album together. And he was like, he dropped the bag off. He's like, yeah, we gonna do an album together.
Yeah, I mean, I know you had the joints, the crew joints together, Dignified Soldiers, and I don't know if those were recorded in the same room together, but
those was all recorded in the same room together.
Okay, yeah, we got Thick, we got Day One, joints like that. But the chemistry with each and every one of your collaborators. I mean, you don't have any collabs on here that sound forced, that sound like imbalanced. So, I mean, what would you give the features here on a scale from 1 to 5? We hear a lot of albums, sometimes the features hurt the album. 1 to 5, would you give this?
Just because only for me, I don't like features. Like, I'm not too, it has to make sense for me. So I never, I never even use my peer power. Because I know a lot of artists in the game, but I just, Mike paid me a shitload of money to do man versus man. But that was my man, and he wouldn't take no for an answer, but Mike paid me a lot of money to do that record, and I was like, I don't need, but he was like, this is the label's money, take the money. And we ended up doing men versus many, but I would give it a 4.
Yeah, you definitely, you never used the Jay-Z card. You know what I mean? You never used the Lost Boys card. Shout out to the Lost Boys. And that would have done something in this era. We'll talk about this in a minute. So
nope. I never used my West Coast cards. None of that.
Something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Dimension 7. Do the weakest songs bring the album down in any way? We get classics that still remain classics, but everybody has a song that they skip. But then you get albums where they're like, man, I wish if this song wasn't on there, it would make the album better. What do you think is the weakest song on this album, in your opinion?
The weakest song?
Is there a weak song?
I would say Jewelz, just because I wanted that Dre record. But, nah, yo, to me, I didn't look at anything as being weak on the album.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find many people who will think that there's something weak. You know, but that's something that's always.
And yo, see, I love your rating system because it's not about it being a weak record. Like being weak don't mean it's a bad record. It just might bring down the cohesiveness of the album. I know what you're saying.
Exactly.
I heard to this day, I still hear that Message record on my album.
I feel you.
But I just, Ness was like.
There's always gonna be like a personal, a backstory to that feeling. But yo, I mean, that's a lot of people's favorite joint, man. Jewelz is the ender, but it's always the most subjective. I try to keep it in a way where it can't be too subjective, but this is all. Regardless how much you try, the weakest song conversation is always going to be subjective. Something for y'all to consider. This is the doozy right here. Dimension 8. Mass Appeal. From a rapper to a rapper, man, this is the process, right? You say you go in and you make the album for yourself. But you became a signed artist for a reason, right? Otherwise, you would just be you'd be a battle rapper, getting your ducats like that. But you wanted to be heard by the masses. So in your opinion, looking back, 97, how far of a reach did you think this album was going to have?
I didn't know. Like I said earlier, getting back, like talking about Nas, he didn't know Illmatic was going to be.
Right.
You understand? Like, you can't make music. Sometimes you can. It's just a couple of records you can, they love this, they gonna bang it.
Right. Because you know what I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you the tough question. When you pick songs like It's Only Right, Dangerous, and Far From Yours, well, shout out to Yvette Michelle. I forgot to mention her as the feature. There's got to be a part of you that knows, these are radio format matching type songs. Is there no part
really
of you?
Though.
Really?
No. Listen. Radio format songs around that time couldn't have no scratches in it. So Far From Yours wasn't a radio record. It was just a melodic record. But
even with the singing hook? Because a lot of purists feel like the moment you have a female singer on a song, you go on commercial. Did you get any flack for that?
I did, but I'm trying to explain it that it was too long, number one, for it to be a radio record. Number one. Number two, it had scratches in it. And at that time with BDS and all that, BDS tracking your spins and stuff like that, if you had scratches in your songs, they wouldn't, your record wouldn't be commercial. You couldn't have a commercial record if you had scratches in it. That's what they was judging BDS spins on. So if you had scratches in it, there was no way they was gonna. So Dangerous actually had scratches in it, but it wasn't in the same format as how when you listen to Far From Yours. Far From Yours sound like a reach to some people, like I was reaching. And it was like, yo, that's a real sample by Brothers Johnson. It's actually, these dudes do jazz, fusion, R&B. It's Quincy Jones. This is Quincy Jones.
Right.
So people like, yo, the Tevin Campbell. I'm like, no. You saying the Tevin Campbell sample. This is Brother Johnson. Until I stopped explaining. I just stopped explaining to people. Yeah, Tevin Campbell, yeah.
You have
to. Tevin Campbell is a remake.
Some of that might be the Achilles heel of coming out with such a hardcore crew. I think a lot of the boot camp members went through this too, and they tried to branch out and get different production because people want to keep you in the box, right? If you're coming from a hardcore underground crew and you making songs like Can't Go Wrong, Far From Yours, they like, what is, they feel like you're deviating, but they don't want you to be three-dimensional.
No, listen, everything I do is about my life. Can't Go Wrong was about my wife. I'm still with my wife. Me and my wife been together since high school.
Right.
30 plus years. I only learned that from niggas like LL. Yo, I've always been melodic. If you actually listen to my music, with the exception of Time's Up, with the exception of War Games, but most of my music has always been melody.
Yep, first single, Born to Live, right? You singing the hook?
Time's Up was the first single, but Born to Live was the second video.
Right. It's what the radio singles, right? Was there any pressure at this point? This album was on. You went from Wild Pitch to Payday, Polygram, right? There's no pressure. This is the era of labels wanting to meddle. Did they meddle or they gave you complete freedom? Did they say put Yvette Michelle on the hook? Did they say do this? None of that?
Well, I went for I tried to get Lauryn Hill and Mary, and they was just too expensive. And I had a relationship, I had a relationship with Flex, and he was Yvette Michelle was coming up at that time. But here's another thing that people don't know. Since I'm speaking about Mary, me and Buck trashed the second album. The first version of Jewelz was a spin-off for My Life. We used every sample that Mary used on My Life.
What?
And we, the crew heard it and was like, yo. And me and Buck was like, word? And it was like, yeah, it's too melodic. And I was just like, hey. And me and Buck scrapped the album. Buck still got those songs.
Wow. That's some creative vision that it's just before its time, man, because a couple years later, that would have been considered genius,
Mary's, that My Life album changed R&B, it changed hip-hop. And, when me and Buck was working on the record, I'm asking him, like, yo, Ghost, you in the studio with Mary or something? He like, nah, because we hearing, everybody getting to hear what other people's working on. And, niggas is telling me, yo, I heard Mary just use that. She used that too. We like, damn. And then we let the crew, we had a listening session for like 6 songs, and, everybody was like, nah, it's not time for that.
That's wild.
And in hindsight, I'm like, yo, I'm the melodic nigga out the crew.
Right.
I make the melodic music. And they was just, the crew was like, nah. The only person who ain't hear those songs was Diamond. But we sat with Show and Ness, and I believe A was in on a couple of joints. They was like,
Gotcha.
Not
that's a hell of a story. I want to. You mentioned Flex, so to my non-New York viewers, man, the Funkmaster Flex. Speaking of Flex, man, he used to blast. He used to open his mix show on Hot 97 every night with My World for no less than 20 minutes. So I mean, he used to play the intro, sample part. So I know it by heart because I used to tape it off the radio, and I used to get hyped because I mean. We'll talk more about this. Is 1997, and I know I sound like a broken record on this channel. I'm always talking about this is the most divided year in hip hop history. Perhaps it's right after 2 major deaths, and the radio formatting was at an all-time high. It was so clear, and the dividing line made a lot of people that wouldn't be considered underground rappers underground by default if you weren't with Bad Boy. Just off not being with Bad Boy, it kind of went Diddy and anybody Diddy affiliated, and then everyone else. So it made this big dividing line. And so that's when you started, besides the fake East and West beef that was going on, there was this underground versus mainstream. You know, J. Rule kind of threw a Molotov cocktail with the radio. It really became this us versus them mentality. And, you know, you mentioned Mike Geronimo. I always use him as the example because Mike went from being this guy known as being like dark videos in the Queens playgrounds to like doing a Shiny Suit video with Diddy, because that was just kind of like the era we were in. Like, it's join us or good luck. And so
I felt Mike was a star too. Like, Mike appealed with no effort. Mike appealed to women. Women loved Mike. So Puff seen that vision. I was mad at him for not chasing that. Like, he let people at that time tell him what he, you know, maybe he shouldn't be doing that. But I'm like, yo, dogs, the women love you. Extra. When you look back at all these things in hindsight, I didn't have the fortitude to be like, yo, this is a business. And
I think hip-hop itself, it wasn't grown enough to accept that. I think the year after, more rappers learned how to balance the two, right? DMX straddled that line effortlessly. He was able to get the streets and the women. But 97, we were immature, man. Even as a rap fan in 97, I remember I wanted anything the opposite of Bad Boy, which is how I stumbled. You know, I was listening to Equinox by Organized that year. I was listening to your album. I was listening to Common. Anything that wasn't Bad Boy, because if you turn on the radio, it was going to be this glitzy sound all year. And I was real mad because they weren't playing Wu-Tang. So I think hip-hop in general wasn't ready to learn how to balance. You are either or. It was very black and white. 98 was a big year where rappers were allowed to do more things. Lauren could give you an album where she could rap and sing. Before, you would have got canned for that. Outkast came out, they could dress weird and still sell. Big Pun. You know, 98 was more of a maturity year. 97 was us or them, black and white. You either underground or you commercial. So for you to survive in that climate, you know, that's why this mass appeal conversation comes up, because what wound up happening, I think, where this album didn't do in sales, it got that critical reception unanimously, which is hard to get. You know, we can Google this album right now from everything from old articles to revisits, and they all speak about it the same way. As far as where this album could have gone, how far it could have gone, where do you get that on a scale from 1 to 5?
I give it a 4.
Nice.
It could have did. It should have did. It should have done gold numbers. That's how I felt. That's how I felt. I felt like the record was called gold. I just felt like I found the lane for what I do, and I separated myself from my other peers. Like, so now we not talking about it, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. It was 1,000 motherfuckers sounding like Nas. Around that time, I didn't sound like him. Like, I had my own style. But I just thought the record was going to go. And, you know, when I look over history now, it took Gangstar maybe like 7 albums.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they never stopped. And they would be on tour with Hammer, then they'd be on tour with Limp Bizkit, then they would be on tour with Nas, Big, Run DMC, like, so they changed my perspective on not worrying about, even though, you know, the bottom line at the end of the day is selling records. That's something we all, yo, keep it real. Nah, that's not keeping it real. That's when keeping it real goes wrong.
Right.
You know, the bottom line is selling records so you can have staying power and some power.
I say it all the time. I say it all the time. No rapper signs that contract with intentions not to be heard by as many people as possible. So you have to consider how far an album can go. We get some weird albums out there, and I'm like, okay, maybe you're a legend, you earn your right to make a self-indulgent album. But for the most part, people eat and live off of this. You got to make albums that people in Germany gonna feel, people in Queens gonna feel. That's a hard job, and you can never please everybody.
Yo, I don't call myself a legend. I'm an average nigga when it comes to the music shit, but it's the people who say who I am, and I just,
right.
If that's how you cool, I'm cool with that. But we can't. I told somebody this a few years back. You can't call an album a classic when it came out yesterday. You rarely get those albums like that. You don't have album after album after album coming along like that.
Word. Dimension 9, the 3 I's: impact, innovation, influence. What do you think this album had when it came to those 3? You think there's any impact, any influence that derived from this album?
Of course. I think a lot of people studied that album. I think a lot of people studied just the way I did, just the way other artists did. Yo, I told you I learned from, my predecessors before me. They taught me how to bar. They taught me how to count bars. They taught me how to structure songs. Besides just Prince and March, like, listening to Public Enemy and listening to all these people, like, they just taught me how to have a structure. So, that's what.
Yeah,
counts.
And you pay homage to your influence all throughout this album. Like, you started My World with a bar from Slick Rick, right? It's been a long time sweating it, right? And then you definitely are a class in showing how to be a student of hip hop and also moving hip hop forward.
Right.
It's there. Now, innovation, I heard, I don't remember, I used to buy tapes back in, so I had this album on tape, but I heard, like, for the CD releases and maybe some of the vinyl, the casing with different colors of different jewels.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Yep.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That was Mr. Dave and my man Fat Gary's idea. Wow. And I didn't know they was gonna do that. So some of the casing is gold, some of the casing is green, some of the casing is red. And it worked out. Like I said, I didn't pay it no mind for years until people was like, yo, my color is green. I'm like, all of them are green. They like, nah. I'm arguing people about, they like, nigga, you don't know the color of your own album?
Right.
And I'm like, nah, it's either yellow, green. They're like, nah, this shit is like 3 different colors.
Yo, that's when this stuff mattered, man. This was the beginning of people getting real creative with how they brought stuff. That all added to the impact, that innovation.
That's what's so dope about our genre of music, like, because everybody has different personalities and they bring it across different.
Absolutely. The journalists are calling it a complete album. They're calling it the perfect blend. For example, Ninth Wonder posted Your Word Life album. Mm-hmm. And he posted that it's so slept on and people need to go back and peep it. And so I started seeing the comments of people like, yo, is it better than Jewelz? So I think that's the legacy that this leaves impact-wise. But a 30-year career, 20 albums.
Yeah.
Man,
this is now I'm digging stuff.
Right. How does that feel?
I don't know. You know what's weird? Like I said, people are just now catching up to me as far as, damn, this nigga's nice. And I'm like, I've been telling y'all this though. I seen niggas shaking their boots when I step in the room. I know what it is. Like, I respect people, but I know I didn't realize what people look at me as, because I don't look at myself in that way. I love music. I make music because I love it. And fortunately I can still make a living off of it. But yo, trust me, man, like if I had the mindset back in the day, like when I was coming up, you know, I'd have went for the gusto and just been like, fuck it, I'm the best. And actually, I wasn't thinking like that. You know what I'm saying? I was thinking like, damn, he's nice. I like him. And then you meet him and he's an asshole. And it's like, I'm gonna make records about you now, but that wasn't my thing. But, you know, I ain't cool with a lot of my peers. I love a lot of their music, but a lot of our peers is assholes.
I believe it. I believe it in a heartbeat, man. When it comes to the influence of this album, the impact, the innovation, what do you get that on a scale from 1 to 5?
I don't know, man. What do you give it?
You'll throw it back on me. I'm gonna give it a 4, man. I think to whether or not people know it on a Thriller level, like a bunch of sales, the fact that something is 25 years old with such reverence, that's the job right there. We can only wish to no matter how many bodies of work we make, you can only wish to have one be put in that pantheon. As long as you get one in that conversation, and you got 2, if not 3, you know, for those that, you know, ventured into the 2000s and heard Bon Appetit or Star Child or your other projects.
It was kids that weren't born when my album came out that know my music today. So that's a big deal for me.
And hopefully this episode introduces a whole new audience. Final dimension here. We taking it home. The overall timelessness and uniqueness of this album. Can you pop this in today and it doesn't sound outdated, it still holds a place, and it stands out from what was out?
Indeed. It hasn't, it didn't, I still have a life in a sense with that album. So if your album 20, 30 years ago sold 20 million and mine's didn't, and people were praising mine's the same way, that means I still have I have the same amount of respect that you have with 20 million with mine's 20,000.
Yeah. There's no, because you didn't follow trends back then, it's not a time capsule type album. You know, we talk a lot about albums because they were doing whatever the trend was then. Like a lot of rap albums got those Neptunes beats from when Neptunes first started, right? Those beats didn't age so well because Chad and Pharrell don't even produce like that anymore. But your album was going for this like musicality, and so because of that, I think it has life beyond its era. It's errorless. It doesn't sound like the 90s. It just sounds like boom bap, which some people might consider that 90s, but it's not, it doesn't have a dated feel. There's some albums, you know, I've reviewed on this channel and I cringe. I'm like, I know they're classics, but they didn't stand the test of time. So, so what you give it on a scale from 1 to 5, overall uniqueness and timelessness?
I give it a 4.5.
4.5, strong. That's how we finish it. On that note, OC, he ain't gonna call himself a legend. I'm gonna call him the legend. The legend. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for running through this. You made history. You're the first rapper to rake his own album using the scale that we created here. Y'all go check out the Rap Ruler and cast your votes and rankings. Let OC know how much y'all appreciate him. And if y'all have not caught up on the catalog, go back and listen to the catalog. The 25th anniversary of Jewelz. Y'all know what it is. Until next time, F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.